Alright everyone, welcome to the new video. So here we'll now try to study about the theory of citizenship. Now we are done with the topics of union and territories. I've given I think 4 to 5 lectures on that. Depending on whether we are doing the articles directly from the constitution, or we are doing the evolution, or we are doing the administration of just union territories, or we are doing the current affairs associated to it, the special case of Delhi. Everything has been done. Now we are moving towards, now that we understand that okay, the areas under the union, or let's say the states जो उनके territories में आते हैं, अब वहाँ जो लोग रह रहे हैं, so what about the people living there, what about the citizens, right? And this topic is very important, especially in the past few years, because of the many issues that have come up with. For example, if you talk about Citizenship Amendment Act, जिसको आप CAA 2019 के नाम से जानते हो, then you have the issues of NPR and NRC. They all are somehow related to the issues. You have the issues of refugee crisis, very much being prevalent. The OCI issue, Overseas Citizen of India. So a lot many things are related to it, and we'll try to cover all of that, at least, in a way that you would get an idea that how you have to prepare broadly these topics. But before we go to the articles and see what the Constitution says about the citizens, before we go to see the original Citizenship Act, because of which the amendments have taken place and it has become controversial, we need to understand about the theory of citizenship. And therefore I have come up with this video. The content I've borrowed is from your class 11th NCERT political theory, and therefore it becomes very, very relevant, especially for the prelims, and in mains and essays also you can have like these ideas inculcated. चलिए अब हम शुरू करते हैं, just to get an idea roughly that if you have to try and understand about defining the word citizenship, so it would be defined as full and equal membership of a political community. And what would be that political community to be, you would say, precisely in this case, of course, we are talking about the state. You know the concept of state, and if you remember, one of the aspects were also the citizenship, like territorial sovereignty, etc. You would say the government, etc. was there, but citizen was one of the parameters, that citizenship was one of the parameters that we have done. So full, इसको हम बोल सकते हैं कि this is how we are trying to define the citizenship in this case, a full and equal membership of a political community that is like a state. But it is not as simple as it sounds. There are many issues associated with this full and equal membership. There are many questions raised about this, and therefore we'll now also try to answer those questions. ठीक है, तो firstly हम ये समझने की कोशिश करते हैं कि ये जो states हैं, what kind of identity does it provide us. So if we try to talk about the states, let's say it gives us a collective political identity, and these are the things you should be keeping in mind. What collective political identity would be given to the members, उसमें अभी हम थोड़ी देर में बात करेंगे. But because of the collective identity that we get from the state, we recognize ourselves as the citizen of a particular nation. For example, we call ourselves as Indians. So we do recognize kind of with our fellow citizens also, and therefore we try to have that identity. But is it like कि just the state is giving something to the members, which is an identity? Because see, if you talk about social identity, if you talk about economic, if you talk about cultural, all of these things will vary in a state. You will have people belonging to different social groups, people belonging to different economic class, people belonging to different cultural background. But one thing that will bind everybody would be the political identity, because everybody of you would be entitled to vote. Of course, if you are an adult, but then you would get a right to vote, or let's say a right to contest election. So these are the things that bind people together and give them an identity. So what does the members do in return? Members को भी तो state के लिए कुछ करना होगा. So members will have certain obligations, ठीक है, जो कि उनको fulfill करनी होगी states की तरफ, ताकि आप बाकी members के भी rights का ध्यान रख सकें. And at the same time, the states would also give these members certain rights. ठीक है. So members would also expect कि if we are also obliging to you, we should have certain rights for that. Now the question would be that when we talk about this full and equal membership, like what is the significance of this? We, being the privileged citizens of a nation, might not understand the significance of it. But just think for a moment about the people who are stateless. Like they cannot belong to a state because the states refuse to accept them as their members. Or the homeless people who are living in some other country, let's say either in asylum or as illegal migrants or refugees. So the point is that when we think about these people who do not have a state which is granting them a membership, who do not have any basic rights, even basic rights like health, education are not provided to them. So in this case, you will understand what is the significance of a full and equal membership. So just imagine if a country denies to accept you as the member of that particular country, or let's say the political entity state here. What will you do? आज तो हमारे पास हैं तभी तो हम rights मांग सकते हैं ना. You get rights only because you are a member. And if you're not a member, if you're stateless, you're homeless, you do not have a right. So आप क्या करोगे? And therefore, this topic becomes important. Of course, we have to think about, let's say when we discuss about a democratic country, we try and understand about certain common rights which everybody gets. For example, the political rights that we talked about, like the right to vote. There would be certain civil rights also, like right to freedom, or let's say, the freedom of speech ho gaya, ya fir freedom of belief ho gaya. Even some socio-economic rights, like there should be at least minimum wages given. Even if we do not have the wage equality, that probably in practicality will never happen because of the nature of jobs will vary. But at least we can try to minimal that gap between the rich and the poor. And then, basic rights like education, etc. These should be given to everybody. And especially the democratic societies do take care of these things. And also, if you say one of the basic rights of a citizenship, to get the equality of rights and the status. Now the whole idea is कि क्या ये rights या membership easily मिल जाते हैं लोगों को? So what we have witnessed in the world history also is that different countries and the people of different countries had to fight for it. So they have got the rights because of a struggle that they had been through. Let's say even if we talk about France, one of the earliest revolutions, if we talk about French Revolution in 1789, from where we got the idea of liberty, equality, fraternity. So people had to fight for their rights. Then the people, in Asia and Africa, who were the colonies to the European powers, they had to fight for their rights. South Africa, the black population had to fight against apartheid. So there are these things that, these things have not been, given easily to the people. Even, let's say in India, agar hum baat karte hain, so after independence, yes, we got certain rights which other countries have not got initially because we have suffered those 200 years of colonial rule. And the leaders were very, very, very clear with the idea that no, we need to give these rights to our people. But there are things which are still continuing the fight for rights. For example, women's movement, Dalit movement, etc., etc. These social groups are still fighting for their rights. So we have to understand that when we have a relation with the state, we have certain rights and obligations also. I'm really sorry for this. Yeah, but we will also have the responsibility towards our, co-members, or let's say the other members. So when you talk about the citizenship and all of that related issue, so in citizenship, you will have a citizen and state relation, citizen, or let's say you say a member and a state relation, but also it will have the relation between citizens and citizens, and therefore we have to take into consideration their rights and other things also. So on one hand you will have the obligations coming from the state जो कि आपको bind करना ही पड़ेगा, but on the other hand you will also have the moral obligation. So here you will have the legal obligations coming from the state, here you will have the moral obligations coming from your conscience that we have to take care of the rights of our fellow citizens also. Now also when we talk about this idea of full and equal membership, things are not that easy because it gives us certain questions and we have to try to answer them. For example, they have given a beautiful example in NCERT. Let's say to talk about the idea of insiders and outsiders. Now what is this idea? This has been historically also, seen in the case of different states. let's say, they are favoring the, you would say, the members of their own state. And now when I say state, which means Rajya, a particular Indian state, not a nation state. But they do not give equal rights to the other people from different states, despite being them Indian, for the reason that they feel that, let's say, we have a limited job, and if people coming from outside will get all of that job, what about the local people? And therefore, many of the states do give the idea of this private reservations. I mean, private in the sense that to the local people. So we have a lot many concepts associated. But let's say the example that I was talking about in NCERT that they have talked, the outsider versus insider. So they, let's say, talk about this crowded bus, and you are trying to, catch a bus that's very crowded. So when you enter that bus, and you would notice that the people who were already inside would kind of feel that insider feeling, and you would be considered as outsider. Even the people inside would not have any as such relation amongst them. But let's say if there is a vacant seat, they would try to get and give it to the people who they have seen कि वो पहले से हैं बस में. And you would be treated like somebody very coming from outside. And similar things would happen in any crowded place for that matter. So these kind of ideas give us a question about the right to freedom of movement. That, this idea of insider versus outsider, let's say that I was talking about some states giving privilege to their own local residents. So in that case, if you're not allowing the other Indian residents to get that privilege also, do we have the question related to the right to freedom of movement? We know that we do get it as a fundamental right in our constitution itself. Yes, no doubt about it. But here the question is that, see, every worker will have some or the other kind of talent, skilled workers or unskilled worker, and they might be getting the job elsewhere, not at the place where they reside. So in this case, we also see that, people do get ill-treated in the different state, or if they are moving out of the country, of course they get ill treatment at times outside the country also. So does this right also include the right to live or work in any part of the country? See, don't consider इसकी हम इंडिया में तो है ही, इंडिया में तो हम जानते ही हैं कि हमारा फंडामेंटल राइट है. When we are doing this theory thing, no, we have to take it like as a universal concept of citizenship, because we would be taking examples from across also, like from different countries also. Therefore, for the time being, we are not talking only about what are the provisions in India. ये तो हम अभी आगे के chapter में पढ़ेंगे, that what are the provisions about citizenship in Indian constitution, or let's say the government which has come up with several acts. Here what we are trying to see कि the whole concept of citizenship क्या कहता है, ठीक है, the whole idea of citizenship क्या कहता है. So क्योंकि यहीं से तो derive हुआ है ना, इन्हीं सब idea से तो derive हुआ है that this should be considered as a fundamental right. इन्हीं सब theory, जैसे when you will do in the further classes, we'll do the topic of, let's say, liberty or equality. So we'll understand that we have got these as a fundamental right because there was a theory behind it, and this was taken into consideration that these are important things to be granted to our people. And therefore, so this raises a question that does having a right of freedom of movement allows us to live or work in any part of the country, because it is related to this full and equal membership. So in a nation state, if you are giving full membership and equal membership to everybody, so they should be allowed to move elsewhere also to start working. Let's say somebody is working in IT sector. So in India, we know that, let's say, Bangalore is the hub for that. So people, you will find there people, right? So, and people will move from elsewhere to that region. But this has a problem because there gets a issue of local people resistance. And they would feel that, these things are about us because we have limited resources, we have limited jobs, we have limited opportunities, and people coming from outside takes this. तो उस टाइम पे विद इन द कंट्री एक रीजनलिज्म फैक्टर हो जाता है, विच ऑल्सो इज अ पार्ट ऑफ योर सोसाइटी दैट यू हैव टू स्टडी एनीवेज इन GS1. देन अनदर क्वेश्चन वुड ऑल्सो बी दैट, एक तो हो गया कि एनी पार्ट ऑफ द कंट्री में इफ वी हैव द राइट टू लिव और वर्क और नॉट. अनदर क्वेश्चन related to this would also be कि let's say if you talk about, let's say, a poor or skilled labor, ठीक है, or workers, should they have same right to live and work anywhere in the country as compared to the skilled laborers? So here the question is depending on the class situation, that if there is a poor or unskilled labor, so would they have the same right to live or work anywhere in the country as compared to the skilled labor? Because we might differentiate on this basis also. So on one hand we might differentiate on insider outsider versus basis, on another hand we might differentiate on the basis of the poverty level or the economic level or the skilled or the unskilled workers. So all of these questions are there whenever a state will consider the idea of full and equal membership, because you would have to answer these questions to reach on to a point. Another question or another issue that is also related to citizenship is about the equal rights. When we take about when we take this issue of the equal rights, we have to consider that whether this idea of full and equal membership means that all citizens, whether rich or poor, should be granted certain basic rights, and should they have at least a minimum standard of living. And of course, who would grant these? The state only. So this is the question. This here, it was about the freedom of movement, that can we go to the other parts of the country also and just do our work whenever we get a good opportunity. But here it is asking about, should the state at least ensure a minimum standard of living by granting certain basic rights to all the citizens, whether they are rich or poor. Let's say we try to see the examples, because with the help of examples only we'll try to appreciate it better. Let's say you take the example of urban poor. Okay, we know that the government is fighting this challenge. Let's say अगर हम अभी थोड़ी देर के लिए इंडिया की बात करते हैं, so we know about that the government is fighting this challenge because in the urban areas you have many problems associated related to the slum dwellers. They get low wages, the hygiene condition is very bad, disease is there, resource strain is there, small rooms, toilet conditions are not good, running water, sanitation issues are there, insecure life is there, property related issues are there. So a lot many things are there, and even they also have to understand ki, they get harassment, they face the issue of harassment also from the at times authorities, from citizens, etc. So there are many issues related to the urban poor. So even if the equal rights, यहाँ पे question आ जा रहा है ना कि are they getting those certain basic rights and are they able to maintain that minimum standard of living? So we get the answer no. Of course, the government tries to come up with certain initiatives to help them. For example, we have a national policy on the urban street vendors. And this, was started somewhere around 2004 to get the idea, or to get you would say, let's say, to provide them kind of recognition and have certain regulations for these street vendors, so that they are able to carry their profession with dignity and they do not face that harassment. Because the vendors, if you talk about, they do contribute significantly to the economy. You talk about hawkers, the traders, the small traders, the scavengers, the domestic workers, weavers, textile painters, etc. You get a lot of contribution from them in the economy, and still the social condition and the economic condition do not get, although they get that political thing, but the social and the economic conditions do not give them equal right. And political they do have the right, but they face the issue because at times, let's say you have to apply for a voter list. Okay, so because you would need to have your name registered in that voter list to be able to vote. Now for this you would need a address proof, and the people who are living on the streets, how would have they got an address to show in the proof, and if they do not get it, they do not get registered themselves in the voter list, and they are, despite having the right, they're not able to use their political right also. So these constraints are there. The another example, if we let's say you talk about the tribal people, or let's say the forest dwellers. So that their way of living is very different from the people living in the cities, and therefore they face the challenges they're not able to be integrated. The government tries to do that, of course, no doubt about it, but then from the fellow people, there is a problem that firstly we have to secure that the way they live, their things are also considered. At the same time, we do not hinder the development of the country also. So it becomes a challenge for the government to balance it, and therefore we have to see that when we talk about equal rights, we are not able to say that it would mean that you have to apply uniform policies for everybody. Equality here. Therefore, जब हम equality की भी बात करेंगे तो you will see this concept that equality will not mean that you will give rights equally to everybody. That cannot be done. You cannot have equal policies for everybody because they have their different needs, different demands. So what does the idea of equality say? It is about giving them that opportunity at least, equal opportunities at least. Okay. So here we have to consider that different groups have their different needs and demands and requirements, and therefore uniform policies will not just work for them to be given them as their right. And you know, with the things changing in the world, economy is changing, situation is changing, social demand is changing. So we are also evolving different meanings of the term citizenship or the rights about citizenship. Because only, let's say, we have a formal law that, okay, citizenship is granted in this way. That will not suffice. You have to constantly evolve that interpretation, because here the concept of equal citizenship will mean that we have to provide the rights and protections to all citizens. And that should be our guiding principle. And that should cater to their needs and their demands, right? So these are certain issues related to the full and equal membership that a state cannot just easily grant it, because there are many issues that are to be dealt with. Another concept, they have given certain other concepts also. So I'll brief you on that also. Let's say there is a concept on citizen and nation. Because different nation states will have the different ideas of citizenship. They will try to come up with different ideas as they have evolved over a period of time. Let's say you start talking about the French Revolution, jahan se kind of you can say a concept of the modern nation state has evolved. Okay. So we have to understand that, you know, there will be different ways by which different nation states, democratic states, will try to define their identity. They will not have the similar ways. They'll try to use different ways to define their identity. For example, if you say, for example, you talk about US. So US as a nation would have that pride. They do have this pride on telling that, okay, we are a country of immigrants. Other countries might not be that proud of that fact, but they are, and that is okay for them. And therefore they relate to themselves like a different kind of identity. Then if you, let's say, talk about France. Now, France says that we are a secular nation also, and we are inclusive nation also. Inclusive because we do not only have the European people, we also have the, let's say, the people coming from North Africa and elsewhere also residing there. So we are a secular and we are a inclusive nation. But when this question of secularism comes, now again this has to be done as a separate topic, but just for understanding, for the sake of just this present topic, understand that secularism would be like the state will not have an official religion. Although in the West and let's say अगर हम Eastern India की बात करते हैं, so we have a very different notion of secularism that we'll do in that topic. But अभी के लिए बस आप यही समझ लो. So in this case here, what has happened? The state straight away says that if you have a personal belief, let's say religious personal belief, you keep it in your private life. But no such thing should be displayed in the public. Public में बिल्कुल secular रहना है. But that could be issues, no? Because even if you have your beliefs and practices and you are trying to use them personally, but let's say you have certain symbols, religious symbols, or let's say certain religious clothing, which is, I mean, as a part of symbol only, that you require to have. So if you will use them, what will be they will somehow be displayed in your public life, because you will step out and you will have, let's say, certain symbols or something like that. So that could be a problem. And therefore we also have to consider in this idea of citizen nation state, a very, very major question or issue that comes up with that assimilation into the national culture is easier for some groups than other groups. The question is, why do we say so? Now see, understand this. Let's say अभी हम फ्रांस की बात कर रहे थे, ठीक है. So in France they said कि आपकी whatever your religious beliefs are, keep it personal in your private life, do not display it in the public life. But certain religions, let's say, they require certain kind of specific clothing, or let's say certain religious symbols, you know, to be, let's say, worn on, displayed, and that is visible in the public life. So that would be a problem for them, because the state will not allow them, but their personal, then, you know, beliefs would also be then questioned. But let's say there are certain religions which do not require as such any belief or costume or something like that, which is visible in public. So in the personal life, you can follow that, the doctrines of that religion, but nothing is visible in the public. So those groups, those religious groups will not have any problem from the state. State will not ask them anything. State will not create a chaos there. So of course, those groups are privileged here in this case, and they are easily assimilating into the national culture. But some groups are facing the problem, right? So this citizen and nation idea will always have this problem. So another issue related to this would be, let's say, to grant citizenship, they use different criteria, different criteria to grant citizenship. For example, if you talk about the countries like, let's say, Israel or Germany, so there the factors like ethnicity, religion would matter to grant a citizenship. So there are countries which do not have issues, but there are countries which have. अब अगर हम इंडिया की बात करते हैं, so we know that we are a secular democratic country, we have this as a constitutional value also, so we accommodate diversity and we give full and equal citizenship to even different groupings like the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, women, etc. We do not have those issues. We consider every language, religion, practices, etc. and accommodate them. ठीक है, and we have varieties of methods of acquiring citizenship. We do not just have a very fixed criteria. So when we will do that topic, you will come across the terms like how you can acquire citizenship in India. Let's say एक तो birth हो गया, ठीक है, और तरीका होता है डिसेंट का, और तरीका होता है रजिस्ट्रेशन का, देन यू हैव नेचुरलाइजेशन. व्हाट आर ऑल दीज, उसमें हम बात करेंगे, ठीक है. अभी के लिए जस्ट यू हैव टू सी दैट व्हाट आर द मेथड्स दैट वी हैव. Another is by inclusion of territory. So in India, we have multiple methods by which we can acquire the citizenship. But different countries might not have this, and the citizens there will face the problem. So there arises a question of another concept that they have given, which is universal citizenship. उसी से निकल के एक और question आता है global citizenship का. But let's understand universal citizenship क्या कहता है. Now see, here they talk about, let's say, the people who are facing problem like refugees, illegal migrants, or people who are displaced by war or famine, etc. So these people, are not accepted by any state. And therefore, the question comes that, do the countries have a policy of accepting these people? Some will have, but some will not have. And the countries which will have a policy of accepting these stateless and homeless people will also be able to accept them in a limited number only, no? Otherwise it will be problematic for their own resource. So therefore यहाँ पे ये problem है that many of the people are not able to achieve the citizenship of a state, where they want to live. And then there is no alternative identity which they get. So the whole idea that a democratic citizenship tries to give to its people is that you get the rights and identity. But here we do not get. So universal citizenship का idea ही यही कहता है that everybody in a democratic setup, everybody should get those rights and identity, ठीक है, to the citizen. And in a contemporary world, this is something that everybody should get. But then there are these challenges which have to be fought, and people do not get this. So what about these people who are, let's say, facing any border dispute or war or statelessness, etc. And therefore, to have a kind of a solution to this problem, some scholars do suggest the notion of global citizenship. कि हमारे एक आइडिया क्या, एक तो हो गया आपका नेशनल सिटीजनशिप, वो तो है ही कि यू बिलोंग टू अ नेशन एंड यू आर अ citizen of that nation. And then there are problems, let's say socio-economic issues, etc., that the state of that country would take care of and the government would take care of. But then there are many issues which are not tackled by them. Let's say there is a dispute between two states or some other matter which individual states will not be able to handle. So in such case, should we have a concept of global citizenship? So of course there are supporters to this, of course there are arguments against this. So the supporters do argue that we are a world community and we should ensure global security to the people, and therefore people, because they're linked with each other across the boundaries, and therefore we should have an idea, something like this, because it might become easier to deal with the problems which exist across the national boundaries, which the national governments independently are not able to tackle. ठीक है. Of course there will be issues then कि how will you manage all of that. There are challenges, no doubt about it, but the whole idea is not to deny the idea of the full and equal membership of one particular state. No, that is definitely very important, because whatever local problem you will have related to socio-economic things, that the particular government will only tackle. The global cannot, like the global scenario mein that cannot be tackled. But let's say in the issues जहाँ पे वो national citizenship totally work नहीं करती है. So can we supplement this national citizenship with this idea of global citizenship and might be having awareness of living in an interconnected world, so that we have a linkage between the people of one country to the people of another country, with the government of one country and the government of another country. So this is the whole idea that has been questioned. Of course, इसका भी कोई answer नहीं है. This is just, debated and people have their own arguments about it. So here I end the discussion on different issues and themes related to citizenship. So just to quickly revise, we saw starting with the definition, which talks about full and equal membership, and within this only we got certain challenges. Okay, what are the dimensions it can have, what are the challenges it can have across the world, and then we got the idea of citizen nation. Then it also has its own set of issues and challenges. Then we got the idea of universal citizenship, that in a contemporary world everyone should get a right and identity, but because we do not get this because of the challenges across national boundaries, should we have a solution like global citizenship, which should be supplemented with the national citizenship, so that we face those problems which are not being able to be tackled by the individual national government. So theory is now taught to you. Then specifically about the citizenship in the case of India is now what we will try to take up in the next video. Thank you so much guys. Take care till then. Hope you have a great time. Bye bye. Take care.